Donald Trump, less than 1 month in what is, in effect, his second term, has achieved more change than, and he has 4 years remaining. This will be the most transformational period in modern American history. We are looking at the endgame state of Zelensky's regime. It was the only logical step forward. To continue the policies of the Biden administration would lead inevitably to a nuclear conflict between Russia and the United States. Russia's interests in Ukraine are existential in nature, literally life and death. Um, and if the United States continue to press Russia, on the Ukraine front to work with Europe to escalate, the escalation ladder could only lead to one thing, which is nuclear war. And the Trump, candidacy made it clear early on that they were not interested in seeking a nuclear confrontation with Russia, that they were seeking an end to the conflict. So, logic is the only thing. Donald Trump is a businessman. He deals with, transactional relationships, and a nuclear conflict, the only transaction is death. So any common sense person, anybody with a smidgen of common sense, would know that Donald Trump would be taking an alternative course. And the other thing is that when you are engaged in making changes of this magnitude, these changes cannot be incremental, and they cannot be done with lengthy pauses between steps. When you have so many enemies aligned against you, so many people trying to undermine what you're trying to accomplish, you have to keep them off balance. It's a simple manifestation of John Boyd's, OODA loop theory, getting inside the opponent's decision-making cycle. And Donald Trump has executed this flawlessly. It's the only option he had. You hit hard, and you keep hitting hard, and you keep hitting hard, and you keep hitting hard, and you never allow your opponents to adjust or recover, and you dominate and you win. And that's the strategy I knew he was going to take. And it's the strategy he took because it's the only strategy that can lead to success. I think people are putting too much emphasis on minor uh, issues. Yes, Mark Fogel, the American that was released, was a confidence building mechanism. And, Zelensky's, refusal, continued refusal to sign a mineral agreement with the United States is also an issue. But understand both of those post-date the strategic decision made by Donald Trump to move forward in a new direction. Um, I think what happened here is that Donald Trump had placed his trust and confidence in an individual, Keith Kellogg, who came in with a plan that was unrealistic. And Donald Trump again was expecting results, immediate results. And Keith Kellogg came in, and the plan couldn't even get any traction. It was dismissed out of hand by the Russians. There was no place for Donald Trump to even attach himself to, a policy of change. And as a result, the Europeans were starting to get the upper hand. You remember what I told you. If you pause, the enemy gets to adjust. And so the Europeans were starting to adjust, were starting to coalesce. Um, and Trump was looking for a new track, and he got the opportunity when uh, he had his special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, went to to Doha to negotiate the ceasefire in Gaza, and in doing so, he was exposed to a number of senior players, including Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman has very good relations with Vladimir Putin and with Donald Trump. And he took one look at Wickoff and he said, "This is Donald Trump's confidant. This is a man Trump trusts. We need to get this man plugged into this problem, the problem of Ukraine and Russia." And next, Wickoff's on an airplane to Moscow, where he receives Mark Fogel. I think many of the negotiations were taking place prior to that. But while he was there, he met with Vladimir Putin. I don't know how many people understand that. And he met with probably one of the most important people in this entire um, escapade, Kirill Dmitriev, who is the head of the Russian Sovereign Investment Fund. Um, if there's one person in Russia who knows the impact of economic sanctions on the Russian economy, can spell it out in detail, um, not just what it cost Russia, but more importantly, from the perspective of Wickoff and Trump, what it cost America, and then what could be done to recover. It's Kirill Dmitriev. And he had a short conversation with a businessman named Steve Wickoff, who then brought it back to a businessman named Donald Trump. And that is what is driving this entire relationship. That Donald Trump is not viewing Ukraine as a national security problem. It isn't a national security problem. Ukraine poses zero national security issues to the United States unless the United States seeks to further it down the path towards nuclear confrontation. Ukraine is an economic problem. The restoration of relations with Russia is an economic issue. And you saw this when Trump picked up the phone, had a 90-minute phone call. Now you'd say, well, why couldn't the president of the United States in his first 3 weeks as president have a 90-minute phone call with Vladimir Putin? Because there was nothing to talk about. Keith Kellogg's plan was unrealistic. The Russians were not going to play ball. And Donald Trump was watching his entire scheme of not just solving the Ukraine problem, but unplugging from Europe. Remember, he needs to get out of Europe. He doesn't need to double down on Europe. And Kellogg's plan was going to get him trapped in Europe. And Trump has a 90-minute phone call where they discuss a wide range of issues, not just Ukraine. And then Rubio and Lavrov meet in Riyadh. Again, they're the ones that are on the photographs, but the real power in that entire meeting was the Wickoff-Dmitriev connectivity, because they made that meeting happen and they drove the agenda of that meeting.
And it
And
was a 4.5 hour meeting. It
four
was
and a half hour
long.
meeting where they discussed energy security, they discussed restoration of diplomatic ties, they discussed trade, they discussed everything but Ukraine. Ukraine was treated in the periphery, because that's all it is. It's a peripheral issue. Um, and then we see where we are today. All the other things, they're just, they're results of this. But the thing that got this going was that Donald Trump finally has an advisor who has latched on to a policy that is viable, realistic, can achieve results. And look at how dramatic things are, how quickly things are unfolding. It was, again, I've said all along, Ukraine cannot be viewed as a national security issue. It has to be dealt with from the standpoint of, what is the real issue between the United States and Russia? And the real issues are economic. If you take a look at, Donald Trump, one of the things he said early on is, de-dollarization and any effort by BRICS to dump the dollar, and he's going to bring 100% tariff on it. Well, let's just chew on that for a second. Maybe you can tell me which BRICS nation has talked about actively, aggressively going forward with an independent BRICS currency. Name one. And the answer is there are none. Even when Vladimir Putin presented his note at the Kazan, he said, it's theoretical. He said, we're not trying to de-dollarize. We don't want to de-dollarize. The United States is making us de-dollarize because of their policies. And this is bad policy for America. The Indians have said the same thing. Modi has said similar things. Brazil has said similar things. China has said similar things. If the United States won't let them use the dollar, then they have no choice but to find an alternative for making international payments to the dollar. But what is being discussed now is bringing the dollar back to Russia. Visa and MasterCard coming back to Russia. I think you're going to see the sanctions lifted on Russia. And now, BRICS. But see, Trump thinks that that's going to make BRICS go away. No, it's not. It just means now BRICS can do what BRICS was going to do using the dollar. It doesn't change it doesn't change the trajectory of change that's taking place. But what it does is preserve the dominance of the dollar. And as long as the United States allows the dollar to be used without seeking to leverage that into things, I think Trump is a businessman. He is a man who says, how do we make money off of this? How do we profit off this? The United States profits tremendously by letting the world use the dollar. Um, and this is, again, a byproduct of this new interface with Russia. This has so much more to do than just Ukraine. Ukraine is the initial obstacle that has to be jumped. But even now, they're saying we're going to put that obstacle off to the side. And I guess there's going to be another meeting in the near future where they're going to basically hammer out the details of restoring full diplomatic relations.